In today's video, we're kicking off the new year in 2024 with some NHL trade rumors around the Toronto Maple Leafs and some goaltending trade options. We also have the latest on Michael Bunting in Carolina and teams that may have interest in him. We also have lots of updates on the Ottawa Senators, the new hiring of Dave Poulin, lots of comments from Elliotte Friedman on where they may be going in the direction of the team, including some potential trades. We also had the Winter Classic today outdoors in Seattle. We also have news from the waiver wire. The PWHL kicked off their inaugural season today, and lots of other news from around the NHL. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today is January the 1st, 2024. Lots of news to kick off the new year. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope you had a fun and safe New Year's Eve, and I hope you're all ready for a big year here in 2024. Should be a really big year in the world of hockey. Of course, today was the very first game of the inaugural season in the PWHL. They have lots of broadcast partners lined up, so if you're in Canada, you can catch games on TSN, Sportsnet, CBC. There's multiple regional providers in the U.S. as well, broadcasting the games as well. Today was the very first ever game in the inaugural season, featuring New York against Toronto. The New York team did win 4-0. We saw a shutout, the first ever goal scored by Ella Shelton. It was a really fun game to watch. Tomorrow's game, they're going to have Ottawa versus Montreal, and it's going to be expected to be an indoor record for women's hockey at the Ottawa Stadium. So certainly off to a great start. Most of these games are sold out in the early going of the season. Most of these cities have had terrific results with season tickets being sold. So it really looks like this is going to be the league that really, sticks and is a long-term permanent, and will give all of our younger female hockey players a chance and something to look forward to and dream as they grow up playing the game and want to get into a pro opportunity, just like we've seen in the NHL for a long time. So good on the PWHL. I thought they had a great start today on New Year's Day, and it's only going to continue to get better. I'm glad to see them come up with lots of broadcasting options. And if I'm not mistaken, I do believe either all or most of their games are going to be available on their YouTube channel for replay. They're not going to be on there live, but once the games are complete, they will be uploaded later on, so you can watch the replays after. So there's no restrictions either. Like, there's no blackouts of any kind, which is kind of good. It's obviously a good way to grow the game, get as many eyeballs on it as possible. A couple of things that they're doing as well when it comes to the rules I thought was really interesting, that I'm hoping the NHL really watches closely and considers in the near future. One is the points and how they're awarded for wins. They're going with a 3-point system per game, not 2. They're going to follow more of the international standard. So they're going to be given 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime win, and you get overtime or shootout, of course, and 1 point if you lose an overtime or shootout, and of course 0 points if you lose in regulation. To me, that makes it a little bit more of an opportunity for teams to push to win in regulation for that extra point, and just makes it so that I think their teams are going to not sit back and wait for overtime. Obviously, they are going with the 3-on-3 in the shootout. And the shootout is a 5-player shootout. Again, kind of lining up with the international standard that we see from the IIHF. The other rule change that they've made that I thought was interesting, we'll be curious to see how it works out. Didn't see it really come into effect today, but they do have a rule that when there is a penalty in play, so when one team has a power play, that regardless of who scores, obviously we know you're on the power play, you score, it nullifies the rest of the penalty. But the defending team that's killing the penalty, if they score a shorthanded goal, then that also nullifies the penalty. I think that's a kind of a neat, cool thing to think about and to implement here in the game. It really will encourage a little bit more of a risk-taking, perspective here on the offense to try to score a shorthanded goal. And if you can score a shorthanded goal, you get your player out of the box. So not only did you not give up the power play goal, you scored shorthanded, and you will cut down your penalty killing time. I really like it. We'll see how it goes and how much of an effect it has. I'd love to see it be considered for future in the NHL, but I do want to see how it goes first with their league, but I'm glad to see them being a little bit experimental in that regard. Of course, today was also a big day. We went from the women's first game ever to the NHL Winter Classic in Seattle. Of course, then the big ball field there, home of the Seattle Mariners. The Seattle Kraken shut out the Vegas Golden Knights 3-0. They had over 47,000 people people in attendance. It was a great turnout. The jerseys looked really sharp. Joey Decord records the very first shutout in Winter Classic history. We have seen other shutouts in other outdoor games. I know Craig Anderson comes to mind when Ottawa and Montreal battled in the, I believe they referred to that one. I thought it was the Heritage Classic, but looking it up, I think they called it the NHL 100 Classic, I do believe. It was the one I had on Parliament Hill. Different gimmick game, I guess you could call it. But in Winter Classic history, it's the first time we've had a shutout. Seattle certainly had their game going. They scored a couple of nice goals. Joey Decord has been hot lately. Seattle's been playing much better, largely, I think, fair to say, because of Decord's impressive run he's been on. And Vegas has only been kind of so-so as of late. I think they're hovering around 500 in their last 10 games. So it was a fun event for sure, well put on as usual. We saw the Vegas Golden Knights players show up as Elvis impersonators, which was kind of neat. And the Seattle players showed up. I believe it was the kind of like the ones that handle the fish at the Pike Fish Market there, the famous market in Seattle. So it was certainly, you always see both teams show up with gimmicky type outfits, and they both were very fitting, both very traditional to where their cities are. So certainly fun game, good result, and nice to see Joey Decord have the run he's had here since the injury to Philip Grubauer, and he's had more of a chance to kind of run with the ball there in Seattle. Lots of other news around the NHL before we get into some trade rumors. Washington Capitals indicate that Max Pacioretty very well could play in their next game here this week. So Pacioretty very close. I expect him to likely go. They've already got Ethan Bear in, so they're getting healthier and get more opportunity to hopefully score some goals. I know they get the next game, I believe, is against Pittsburgh. So Caps Pens here once again. In Columbus, I know we had a scary situation back before the holidays with Sean Corrali. The latest update from Pascal Vincent and the coaching staff says that he's going to be out for about 2 more weeks. So it was a scary situation. It wasn't really, I guess, as bad as some people thought. I know ultimately it was, after he went down the tunnel, a lot of people were calling for help, and there was some concern. I'm, listening to him kind of tell his side of what happened. It certainly wasn't, I guess, as scary as we were led to believe. But thankfully, he's going to be fine. It's an abdominal injury, and like another 2 weeks or so, and he should be back. For Detroit, they've recalled Zach Aston Reese. The Predators have sent back Askarov. Of course, he was called up to play goal for a game. He's been returned to the American Hockey League. And, of course, the Maple Leafs have recalled goaltender Dennis Hildeby, of course, because of the fact that Samsonov was on waivers yesterday. So Samsonov and Eric Comrie, the Buffalo Sabres, both those goalies did clear waivers today. So that's, of course, not a huge shock. As we talked yesterday, there were more than anything, Samsonov was being sent down to kind of get a mental reset and just to have some time away from the team to work on his game for a few weeks. Eventually, probably in a week to 10 days, 2 weeks, will play a few games in the minors, but he's not going to play immediately. He's going to be given some time to do a reset, do some video work with the mental skills coach, goalie coach, etc., and just to try to reset and get things back going. And then once they feel he's ready, they'll put him in for a few games. And if he does well, he'll get a recall. And if he pulls a Jack Campbell and doesn't, then he won't. It's just that simple. I mean, they're going to bring up Hildeby for right now, and we are going to talk about some other goalie options because there are many that are convinced that Samsonov's time in Toronto was pretty much done. Even if he does get a recall, I don't know that he's going to be back after this year for sure. I don't know that he's tradable right now because of his contract, but at the very least, his time is ticking in Toronto. I think that part is fair to say for sure. The St. Louis Blues have recalled Nathan Walker. The Blackhawks, currently on the road, have sent Tyler Johnson back to Chicago with a right foot injury, so he's going to be out for a little while. The Lightning had to do some maneuvering of their cap, and they had to move defenseman Hayden Fleury to long-term injured reserve, so he'll be out a little bit longer while he continues to recover there. So certainly lots of activity on that front. As I mentioned, though, with the Leafs and Samsonov clearing waivers, which is not a huge shocker. Lots of talk about Leaf goalie trade options. There was a couple of articles I've looked at in the past 24 hours, some between Sportsnet, The Athletic, listening to Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast. Lots of talk around the goalie situation in Toronto. Clearly, like I said, the plan in the short term is to let Hildeby come up, They may play Martin Jones even on a back-to-back, both games, just to give Hildeby some time to be around a big club and practice with them before they give him a game. Eventually, he likely will have to play because Justin Wall is still a little ways away. But obviously, when Wall comes back, which we don't know exactly when that's going to be, they'll hopefully be in better shape. But they need some security beyond him. And like I said, there's some talk that the Leafs might be definitely in the market now to find some more depth at the position. Lots of names mentioned, like I said, between Elliot Friedman and 32 Thoughts, the Sportsnet article from Luke Fox, and the Athletic article from Jonas Seigel. Lots of names mentioned. I've seen, do they look at a big deal where they trade for like a big name like a Jacob Markstrom or John Gibson or Elvis Merzlikins? Those are complicated for sure. And at the same time, do they have the assets that they're willing to part with to do that? It's hard to say. They explore those even though they're less likely. They are mentioned in the articles and different information is out there. We've seen names like Louis Domingue, who's the third, I guess you'd call him like the third string goalie with the Rangers. He's with their AHL team. James Reimer in Detroit, if they can stay healthy in Detroit. Yzerman's not going to be trading a goalie for a little while though, because like Alex Lyon, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he got hurt again. I'm not sure if he's going to be out for a period of time, but he's had trouble staying healthy. So between Husso and Reimer hasn't been all that good, to be honest, this year. But I don't know that they want to move him just yet because they kind of need him while everybody's kind of getting healthy. You've got Dan Vladar in Calgary when the Flames become ready to that point, you could say. A lot of people think the Flames are not quite ready to start making trades yet. Like, obviously, I mentioned Jacob Markstrom as well. And there is some thought out there that maybe Markstrom could be made available, but given his contract, trade protection, everything, it's less likely that he goes. Vladar is more likely. Obviously, they want to get Dustin Wolf more in the mix. There's Jaro Halak, who's a pending UFA, but I mean, he's already had a PTO. It wasn't signed, so I don't know if he's really going to be the right solution in Toronto. There's Kakinen, the goaltender from San Jose, who's been relatively good considering, especially with a weaker team in front of him. He would be a much cheaper option, and if he could run the ball for a little while, it would be a cheap way of not giving up a lot of assets, not having a big cap hit, that they might be able to find their way into something. And of course, the other interesting name that's come up, though, would they make a trade with Montreal for Jake Allen? Now, of course, Jake comes with a little bit higher of a cap hit. I think he's around $3.8 million. And he has another year. So clearly they would be tied to him for one more season. Now, of course, right now, though, the future of goaltending in Toronto is very much uncertain. Like I said, regardless of what Ilya Samsonov is able to do or not do the rest of this season, it's probably fair to say the Leafs have seen enough that they're definitely not going to re-sign him. Is he tradable? Probably not. Probably would not without adding a sweetener, which is something they're probably not going to want to do. Does he get recalled, get another chance? It's hard to say. Maybe. I think that's always the plan, because if he can play well enough, then you're going to be wanting to stick with him. But at the same time, do you trust him when you get to playoff time? Or what if Joseph Wall gets hurt? Like, don't you want a stronger tandem? And I'm not completely sure that they're fully sold on Marty Jones being the number 2 guy. I still think they might prefer for Jones to be the number 3, which is what he's been brought in for. If they can have somebody to compete with him for that number 2 spot and have him be 3, I think they'd feel a lot more comfortable with the depth of the position. Not to say that Jones hasn't been decent. He has been. But it's just hard to say. If they can find another goalie that's at least capable as him, if not more, then that'll just make the position that much stronger if they run into injuries. Now, like I said, Jake's an interesting option. You don't see many trades between the Leafs and the Habs. They're probably going to want Montreal to retain some money. I know Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast said it's believed that Ken Hughes kind of has his price and he's not really wavering too much, but that's what teams are talking about on the market right now, is that, how much can they get him to waver on a contract like Jake Allen? How much will they retain? It's obviously a little more challenging when, you have a little bit of term on the contract to retain than when it's a pending UFA type of deal, right, where it's a rental. So, is Jake the perfect solution for them? No, but he is solid. He is stable. He's got a Stanley Cup to his name. He knows what it takes in the playoffs. He's been through the battles numerous times before. And if they did end up with a situation where they traded for him and kept him, and that, say, Jake Allen, Joseph Woll was a tandem next year, that's not so bad. I mean, Joseph Woll is making peanuts for money. So if you have a Allen Hall, a Wall tandem, I don't know why I want to keep calling, every time I want to say Wall, Justin Hall's name comes out, and I don't know why. I apologize for that. It's Wall. I know that. For some reason, my brain says Hall, and I can't explain that to me. One of the weird things I stumble on. But anyways, like Joseph Woll and Jake Allen as a tandem next year, the total money for the goaltending position wouldn't be that much. It'd be under $5 million. That's pretty good. Right? So, at the end of the day, Samsonov's likely not coming back. Jones, it's hard to say what the future holds for him. He's really just an insurance piece this year. Then you've got Hildeby, who's, you're going to get a chance to see where things are at with him. So, I don't know. I mean, could we see the two original 6 teams hook up on a trade? It's possible. I think it gets tricky. It gets complicated. Although I do think, just from a logistics standpoint and who would be a good, stable option to help them, I do think he's one of the better options that are out there. But whether or not it happens, completely another story. Now, former Maple Leaf Michael Bunting's been getting some talk from Elliotte Friedman in the trade market, of course. He mentioned on Saturday Headlines that there was word from other teams and places he talked to and rumors he's heard around the league that Bunting's name has been out there when Carolina's been talking to teams about goaltending trades as well. We know the Hurricanes are definitely in the same market as the Leafs and a few other teams when it comes to finding goaltending help. And that Bunting might be a player they're willing to part with because they most likely need to clear some money to make it happen. Well, obviously, Bunting signed a 3-year free agent contract with them this past year. Hasn't been a complete bust or failure. He actually had a decent start, and he's been playing better as of late, but the big chunk of time in between, there has been some ups and downs, and he went from playing in the top 6 to lower in the lineup and just hasn't found his way. He seemed like he's starting to come around. The game against his former team, Toronto, kind of got things going a little bit. The last couple of games have been better, but will he stay there? It's hard to say, right? So they're willing to entertain that. And according to Elliotte on the podcast today, he made mention that he's been told that one GM that knows Bunting very well was rumored to be interested in acquiring him, and that's Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh. So we'll see. I mean, we know the Penguins are, might have to be early to jump the gun here to make some moves if they want to really try to investigate in the playoffs, and I know they do. The goal all along with this Penguins team is to try to win with this core group one more time, and that's what Dubas has been tasked with, and he made a ton of changes in the offseason, but things have not worked out the greatest with their wins and losses this year. They're having a tough time. They're not really in a great spot in the standings. They've had their moments where they look good. They've had their moments where they look not so good. And Bunting could come in, add some grit, add a different element that they don't necessarily have a lot of, and hopefully provide a spark and some offense for the top middle 6. So we'll see. I mean, if the Carolina Hurricanes do make a trade for a goalie, and it's expected that they probably will, Bunting could be the guy that goes, and it might not necessarily be, I'm not saying they're going to make a trade with Pittsburgh for a goalie. If that happened, it would have to be a separate trade. So we'll see. It could be a cost-cutting move to make space for another goaltender. And in Ottawa, Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Merrick on the podcast, they talked a lot about the Senators after the big news came out yesterday that they hired Dave Poulin as the new, basically, senior vice president. So essentially, if you think about it, the setup in Montreal is what Michael Andlauer, the owner there, has talked about a lot because that's where he obviously was a minority owner before he bought the Senators. So he knows their system and how things worked, and he liked how it was set up with the Jeff Gorton and Ken Hughes situation. Now, if you think about it, technically, Jeff Molson holds the title of, I believe, a president, and Jeff Gorton is the executive vice president and head of hockey operations in that sense, and then Hughes is the GM. They hire Poulin to be the vice president. President is Staios, GM is Staios, and Ryan Bowness gets bumped to associate GM. I really believe in the short term, I'm not sure how long it's going to take. Maybe it's 1 year, maybe it's a little longer, I don't know. Ryan Bowness is going to be the GM of this team, I honestly believe. They seem to absolutely love this guy, and rightfully so. I think he's done a lot of good work there, and he's been very impressive. He has a good resume. Spent a lot of time with in the old Penguins organization, of course, before, not with the current regime, of course, but, when they were winning Stanley Cups, 16, 17. So, he's, and his father and the whole family's been in the game for their entire lives. So he comes from a great background. And I really think that long-term, Staios will only be president, Bowness will be GM, and Poulin will be his right-hand man as the vice president that they can lean on and make decisions with. It's funny, about a week ago, before he was hired, Dave Poulin, when he was still with TSN, on one of his radio hits, had said if he was going to be in charge of hiring a new head coach in Ottawa, that the main name that would come to mind that he would go after right now would be Craig Berube, former coach of the St. Louis Blues. And now here he's actually working for the Senators a week later. He said he still knows Berube, still has existing relationship with him, so they still connect once in a while. I've seen lots of Sens fans mention Berube as being a potential candidate. He might be that hard-nosed coach who can push this team to the next level. Jacques Martin and Daniel Alfredsson are going to do it. They're doing a lot of good work. And whether or not Alfredsson stays on the staff, that's really remotely possible. I think it's quite good chance he does. Or maybe after testing coaching, maybe he'll prefer to stay in his role in player development. Hard to say. He's going to be involved in the organization one way or another. There's no doubt on that front. Jacques Martin very well... wouldn't be surprising if he's only the head coach for this year. But if they really do want Craig Berube, they will have an opportunity to bring him in sooner if they really want to, since he is technically available now. We'll have to wait and see where that goes, but I just thought it was a very interesting comment from Pooley just a week before he was hired by the Senators, so it'll be interesting to see if what he thought at that time is something that he brings to the table and that they actually seriously consider doing. Friedman also went on to talk about the fact of why now? Why? Because a lot of people thought that the GM search and the additional person that was going to be hired in the front office was probably going to have to wait maybe till the end of the season. And he said, to me, the fact that they wanted to get this done and bring in Dave Poulin now and not really do an extensive search tells me that they have things that they want to do and they want to get to work. So they've already made changes with the coaching staff. They wanted to hold off. They wanted to wait. And they couldn't wait anymore because the team was struggling mightily. So they pulled the trigger on a change to bring in Jacques Martin. So far, he's got them playing better. They did lose the first couple of games, but they've won 3 of their last 4. Now, they do have a tough road trip ahead of them. I'd be curious to see how much of the bad habits he can kind of continue to break and beat out of them here in the short term. But ultimately, something had to give, and it's happened. Now the full evaluation is on for the roster. January is when trade season picks up in the NHL, and basically what Friedman's saying is that they really need to essentially make some decisions on this roster now, and they probably need a little bit of time. But Dave Poulin's been a hockey analyst and done a lot of he's done a lot of play-by-play or color commentating for different games. Like, he's seen the Senators all season, so he doesn't really need a lot of time to learn what this team is like on the ice. I mean, he might need some time to learn what these guys are like off the ice and the team dynamic and all that, but essentially they got some work to do. There's no doubt that between some of the roster moves they need to make, that something's going to have to give here with the Senators soon. There's no doubt about it. That's basically, he's been brought in to help accelerate some moves. Dominik Kubalik's name comes to mind. Vladimir Tarasenko's name comes to mind. The pending UFAs, they have to determine if they're going to be part of the future or if it's time to move on. It's just that simple. When he talks about the core players that he mentioned in the podcast today, but basically these are the guys that the Sens want to build around, he mentions a lot of the young players that are expected to not really be considered for trades. You're looking at Timmy Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Drake Batherson, Josh Norris. He mentions Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chychrun, and the returning Shane Pinto. Shane Pinto now has a stall set up in the Canadian Tire Center in the dressing room. He's going to be allowed to start practicing with the team 10 days before. So when they return, they're going on a 4-game Western road trip. He's allowed to return January 21st. By the time they get back from the road trip, he's going to be allowed to start practicing with the team. So while they're away, he's able to be in the facility. He's able to start working out, skating more, using team facilities and all that. So that's good news. The contract that he's going to have to sign, no, Friedman says he believes it's most likely going to be his qualifying offer for the rest of this year. But he said since they've had a change in GM and since Dorian's been out and Staios has been looking after things, he's been told that there has been some discussions about getting a long-term deal done now instead of later. I mean, it is possible based on the cap. They might find it too difficult to get all the agreements in place and want everything how it needs to be, and they might put it off to the summer just to give them more cap flexibility. But it's also possible that they don't, and that they just get it done now. I mean, obviously his value because of the suspension is down. I think it would benefit the team if they could lock him up at a lower number and to get it done for multiple years. But they certainly see him as being a part of the team's future. There was some questions around whether or not they were going to move on from him. I guess I'd never seen that myself, but Friedman said he had heard from a few people that there was some talk about that. And now there's really, he said that's been proven wrong, and that they want to keep him long term to be a part of their core. So while the Ottawa Senators are expected to start making some moves now that they got all their people in place, expected to not be around the core, expected to be the building around the core. So like I said, you're looking at Tarasenko, Kubalik, guys that kind of are brought in to insulate those guys. And Giroux is another name to mention, of course, as part of those guys as well. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news. I hope you all had a great Happy New Year. Let me know your thoughts on the future here of what we're going to see as NHL trade season starts to pick up a little bit in January. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.